But that leads me to the next point that I want to make. And it might be an unpopular one, but I'm going to say it anyway. Trump and the Republicans bring this shit on themselves. All right, guys, got a little bit of an update on the story about the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. This guy, Ryan Routh, a little bit more information at the time. The first time I saw it, the story was like a couple of hours old, so we got a little bit more information. I want to go through like a little bit of this guy's background. He is kind of a Looney Tune. And then talk about like some of the stuff that's happened in the aftermath of that and my opinion on some of the lessons that we should learn. But before I get into any of that, go ahead and like the video if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. It just helps get the channel growing, and it gets the video out there to more people, and it's totally free, and it means the world to me. All right, thanks. So let's get into it. This guy is from North Carolina originally. He's from Greensboro, about an hour away from where I live. So did a little background on him. He was apparently arrested back in 2002, and I've seen a couple different stories on this. One was that like it was a police chase. He was stopped. He had a gun in the car, like a fully automatic AK-47 in the car, from one report that I saw. But I also saw that he also had a bomb. And so, like, the thing ended where he, like, went into the roofing company where he worked. Like, he barricaded himself in the building, and that's how that chase ended. But he got charged with possessing a weapon of mass destruction. So, and that was all the way back in 2002. This time around, he's been charged with possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number. So the gun that he had at the golf course at the time, not clear as to whether he bought the gun legally and then scratched the serial number off himself, or if he bought an illegal gun that already had the serial number scratched off. Don't really know that, but the point that I'll get to later on is why the fuck does this guy have an AK-47, and why do normal citizens have guns like AK-47s? This guy was charged apparently over 100 times in Guilford County. So Guilford County is where Greensboro is. His neighbors had some interesting things to say. That interviewed his neighbor in Greensboro, and they said, you know, never thought he would have tried to shoot the president or the ex-president. But they were also quoted as saying, they had a lot of guns and stuff over there. A lot of people were afraid of him back in the day. So his neighbors knew that this guy was a little bit off his rocker a long time ago. And as far as this story about the 2002 arrest, it was over 20 years ago. But getting caught with a fully automatic rifle or a bomb or both, whatever, kind of wild. So here's the other interesting part. He voted for Trump in 2016, and this guy had supported Trump up until 2020. So I'm seeing actually a lot of things that are sort of familiar, sort of similar to the previous Trump assassin, or, you know, like would-be assassin, although he got taken out, was Thomas Matthew Crooks, also a Trump supporter, reportedly a registered Republican, very conservative according to his classmates in high school. Both of them had guns that the Democrats anyway have questioned the idea of whether or not normal citizens should have things like AR-15s and AK-47s, things like this, you know. Try to have like some sort of a reasonable discussion around normal people just having weapons of war sitting around their house. And the Republican position on this has always been, it's my right because the Second Amendment says it is. And anytime there's any kind of, you know, a violent crime, a mass shooting, which, by the way, those happen pretty much daily in the United States. the category for it to be like a mass shooting is it has to be like 3 or more people injured or 4 or more people injured or killed in it. So those happen pretty much daily in the United States. The most recent one I covered, the Georgia shooting at the high school, that kid, Colt, had an AK, or not an AK, he had a AR-15, but that was legally bought by his dad, who gave it to his son, like a 14-year-old. So again, like the gun problem in this country, I just want to make this so clear. We are the only country in the world that has this issue. We're a country awash with weapons. This country is a tinderbox, politically speaking, and then a lot of other things, like people have economic issues and that's part of what drives the crime and whatnot. And we have guns everywhere, and we have at least one political party that's goal is to make sure that we don't do anything to even remotely regulate how these guns get into the hands of normal people. I digress, though. So he was a Trump supporter. Apparently he blames himself. I'm talking about Ryan Ralph. Apparently blames himself a little bit for having voted for Trump. Now here's where it gets interesting, because you can't really like paint this guy into any political box besides the confused box. He was a supporter of Tulsi Gabbard during the 2020 primary. Now, if anybody remembers back then, Tulsi was a Democrat. She was running as a progressive. Her main message was, being anti-war and, the dangers of the military-industrial complex. So I think that it kind of makes sense that Ralph supported Tulsi Gabbard at one point, supported Trump at one point. He sort of got hoodwinked for the whole I'm anti-war, and it's one of the narratives that just drives me up a wall about Donald Trump. When Trump supporters say that, like, he's anti-war, or there were no new wars, or there were no wars, or whatever under Trump, it's bullshit. Trump said, I'm going to get out of the wars. Never got out of Afghanistan. Never got out of Iraq. He absolutely escalated with Russia, with North Korea, with China, with Iran. He tried to coup Venezuela. I mean, like, he ordered the airstrike on Qasem Soleimani, who was an Iranian general who was fighting ISIS. So he's kind of like our de facto ally. Trump had him taken out. He did a massive weapons deal. It was like a $12 billion weapons deal to Saudi Arabia so that they could bomb Yemen. The idea that Trump is a dove just really pisses me off. So, because people just don't know that, like, they're narrative humpers and they don't know the facts about what Trump actually did when he was in office. But again, I digress. It seems like this guy is motivated by being anti-war, which is sort of why he supported Tulsi and then apparently eventually supported Bernie in the primary. It doesn't say who he voted for in 2020, but apparently he also wanted a Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy ticket he floated, which really makes no sense because Nikki Haley is a war hawk. So, and he also gave money to Act Blue, which is like Act Blue is they handle contributions to Democratic campaigns, totaling about $100. So like this guy's all over the place. He's really all over the place. I could best describe him as politically confused. I'll put it that way. But that's not going to stop the right-wingers from saying that it's the Democrats' fault that somebody else tried to shoot at Trump. I'll get to that part in a second. Lastly, it seems like his main pet project for the past couple of years has been Ukraine. He's been a very outspoken person about the war in Ukraine. He said, he was quoted as saying, like, a lot of these are have gray area. The war in Ukraine is black and white. So he supports Ukraine. He thinks Russia's in the wrong. He wrote a book that he self-published called Ukraine's Unwinnable War, in which he called Trump a buffoon. And he also volunteered to fight with the International Legion for defense of Ukraine. And he's like been over in Ukraine. He moved, he was living out in Hawaii and then he moved over to Ukraine for a while. Anyway, there was another section of the book where he was talking about Iran, and he said, quote, "You are free to assassinate Trump for that error in judgment and the dismantling of the deal." I think he's probably talking about the Iran nuclear agreement. And if you're not familiar with what that is, again, idea that Trump is, anti-war is stupid. The Iran nuclear agreement, what it did was it made sure that Iran was not able to enrich uranium past the point of nuclear power for their power grid. And in return, we lifted a bunch of sanctions and gave the Iranians back a bunch of their own money. It was arguably one of the better things that Obama did. And Trump got into office and immediately scrapped the Iran nuclear deal. And then, would you look at that, we're escalating with Iran. So, but I want to get into a couple of other things, couple of, elephants in the room. On either side, you have to denounce political violence. But that leads me to the next point that I want to make. And it might be an unpopular one, but I'm going to say it anyway. Trump and the Republicans bring this shit on themselves. Because he says all kinds of crazy things that stoke political violence all the time. And it's always on the Democrats to be the adults in the room and to say, hey, we absolutely oppose political violence. And it's not just Trump. It's Trump acolytes, other Republicans, right-wing media, and I'll show you a little bit of it in a second. So firstly, right after this, Trump said they use highly inflammatory language. Quote, "I can use it too, far better than they can, but I don't." And he said this in an interview with Sean Hannity. I'm going to call bullshit. So this Trump post on Twitter, or X, he put out an excretion. It says, "The rhetoric lies as exemplified by the false statements made by Comrade Kamala Harris during the rigged and highly partisan ABC debate, and all of the ridiculous lawsuits specifically designed to inflict damage on Joe's, then Kamala's, political opponent, me, has taken politics in our country to a whole new level of hatred, abuse, and distrust. Because of the communist left-wing rhetoric, the bullets are flying, and it will only get worse, allowing millions of people from places unknown to invade and take over our country is an unpardonable sin." And then it goes into all caps here. "Our borders must be closed and the terrorists, criminals, and mentally insane immediately removed from American cities and towns, deported back to their it does say counties. Counties of origin, not countries. We want people to come into our country, but they must love our nation and come in legally and through a system of merit. The world is laughing at us as fools. They are stealing our jobs and our wealth. We cannot let them laugh any longer. Make America great again." So the idea that it's the Democrats' fault for the rhetoric, the violent rhetoric. Trump does this literally on a daily basis. He will not mention Kamala Harris or any Democrat he's talking about for that matter without calling them radical communist or radical Marxist or radical whatever the fuck. So he always does this, and he always has. And I'm going to go back to some of the things that he said in the past, which will bolster my claim that he and the rest of the Republicans are really at the center of why there's a lot more political violence. And I'm not blaming Trump for getting people to want to shoot at him, but he definitely doesn't help. So this is from the New York Post. If you're not familiar, New York Post is a right-wing rag. It's also owned by the Murdochs, who own Fox News and Sky News in Australia and all those other, right-wing outlets. Look at how this is titled. Alleged would-be Trump assassin Ryan Ralph, 58, of Hawaii, echoed Harris, Biden's anti-Trump rhetoric as he backed Dem candidates. So it's painting it as like Harris and Biden, their anti-Trump rhetoric is the reason that this guy is trying to take out Trump. It's titles like this. And you know that like people don't read necessarily everything. They just read the title of the article and they go, oh, okay. But there's more. So this is other Republicans. This one I actually got a kick out of. There was a post originally on Twitter and it said, carry on with your Sunday. No one's ears were harmed. To which Donald Trump Jr. said, these people are fucking demented. To which this person responded to his original post, said, got my Paul Pelosi Halloween costume ready, and there's a pair of underwear and a hammer. And the guy wrote, is this you? So remember, guys, when Paul Pelosi got attacked by, again, a crazy right-wing person and got bludgeoned with a hammer, people like Don Jr. were making fun of it. People like Donald Trump were saying that, like, the glass was broken from the inside going out, so the guy was trying to, like, escape the house. A bunch of people were making fun of this. So the Republicans don't condemn political violence when it happened to Paul Pelosi. But I got more. Because Trump has literally based his entire political career on stoking violence. When he came into office, or when he ran in 2015 and 2016, he was talking about how we got to close the border and the immigrants are stealing their jobs and they're not sending their best. They're sending their criminals and they're sending their rapists. And I assume some might be okay. But he's made an entire career in politics out of being extremely anti-Mexican, anti-immigrant. He just embarrassed himself on national TV talking about Haitian migrants eating people's pets. A story that I'll get to in just a second, but like, one, it's been completely debunked, and two, JD Vance had to answer for it, and he had a really interesting admission. He called for a Muslim ban as soon as he got into office. He says that other countries are emptying their prisons and sending them here. In Charlottesville, when Heather Heyer got killed, and there were neo-Nazis running around in the streets saying the Jews will not replace us. Donald Trump said that there were very fine people on both sides of that protest. He got asked in a debate to denounce the Proud Boys and some of the other, violent right-wing supporters that he has. And he was told, can you denounce them on the debate stage? And he said, what do you want me to say? And they said, just denounce it. And he said, stand back and stand by. That is not a denunciation of violence. I could go on and on and on about Trump. But suffice it to say, he ain't no angel. He ain't no dove. And that still doesn't mean that somebody should be able to shoot him. I want to make it super clear that I do denounce political violence on both sides. And I want to make it clear that I do want Trump to not be the president of the United States again. But I would much rather see him in prison for the rest of his life. I don't want to see him getting taken out. So, like I said, still learning more about this guy as the story breaks, but suffice it to say, he seemed deeply confused in terms of like his politics and where he actually stood, going from being a Trump supporter to being a Tulsi Gabbard supporter to eventually supporting, I guess, Bernie Sanders, to floating the idea of a Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy ticket. But the idea that this is the Democrats' fault for stoking political violence is completely stupid. And it's bullshit. Two things can be true at the same time. You can denounce Trump's violent rhetoric. You can criticize his dangerous policy vis-a-vis his foreign policy, his abortion policy, his economic policy, all of that. And that doesn't count as saying you want him dead. So the idea that like it's the Democrats that are stoking the political violence, it's exactly flipped. And what the reason why I showed the title from the New York Post is because right-wing outlets post stuff like that all the time. Fox News has their people talk about that kind of stuff like all the time. So we got a big problem in general of just way too many agitated people with way too easy access to firearms. And again, I'm not a they're going to take your guns kind of person. Like, I have guns in the house. I'm not anti-gun. But we have to have a reasonable discussion about why this keeps happening in the United States. Anyway, guys, hope you like that. I'm going to talk next about the disaster that JD Vance had on his interview with CNN in the next one. And if you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.